Jury selection begins today in Brunswick, Georgia, in the murder trial of a Cobb County man charged in the death of his 22-month-old son. Ross Harris is accused of intentionally leaving his son Cooper in a hot car. He died in June of 2014. Now, Harris claims it was an accident. The trial is being held in Brunswick down in southeast Georgia because the judge agreed that Harris could not get a fair trial in Cobb County. So we want to bring in trial lawyer and Emory Law School litigation professor Randy Kessler now to kind of break down some of the legal points in this case and talk about possible strategies we may see used by both sides. Randy, we appreciate you being here.
My pleasure.
All right, let's talk about this move to Brunswick first.
Okay.
Is this a better deal for the prosecution or for the defense?
You know, you could argue both ways, and I guess that's what good lawyers do.
Right.
If you're the defendant, you're thinking, well, everybody doesn't really know me out there and they don't have this bad press. But if you're the prosecution, you might think in Cobb County, people could look at this guy and say, he looks like me, he looks like my neighbor. He doesn't have a criminal background. I can't imagine my neighbor doing something like that. Whereas in Brunswick, they might say, you know, those people up in Atlanta, they're a little different than us. They may have some inherent bias against the big city folks.
Well, isn't that the same kind of problem, though? You relocate it so that you don't have people with preconceived ideas, but you run into that same thing in Brunswick. They may say, hey, this big city guy from Cobb County.
That's true, but you can't get rid of human prejudice. What you can't get rid of is the pretrial publicity, and I think that's what the judge was worried about. Everybody in Cobb County has heard about this. A lot of people in Brunswick have heard about it, but maybe not everybody.
Why do you think the judge granted this request, though?
Well, I know this judge well, and I think she's just a very fair-minded judge, and I think she felt in her gut or in her heart she was not going to get a fair trial from these people because they already thought he was guilty or they already had preconceived notions, and she just did what I think she thought was the right thing.
So, living in Atlanta and going through all this, I think a lot of people here probably have a feeling how this case might go. Do you think it's a sure thing either way at this point?
You got to remember the burden of proof is really strong in a criminal case. They've got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Does everybody think he did it? Most people probably think he probably did it. Maybe he did it, but that's not the standard. They've got to prove beyond any reasonable doubt that this father killed his own child, and that's a pretty hard burden.
Let's talk about jury selection. They're estimating 2 weeks. How do they come up with that number? How long do you think it'll take?
I think it's a guess. I think it's going to take a little bit longer, but that could be, you know, if the jurors are open-minded and fair and responsive, 2 weeks, fine, but that's the most important part of the trial, so no one's going to rush through it. The defense is definitely going to take their time. But 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, you know, they have one frame of reference because they already did it once.
Right.
So
Claire Sims is down there reporting this morning. She said that they're going to choose from a pool of 250. Is that a larger pool because of this case,
Sure.
or is that pretty standard?
That's a pretty big pool, and I wouldn't be surprised if they have to pull in more people. If they get going and every single one says, I heard about this, and this guy's done it, I'm sure he's guilty, they'll have to bring in a lot more people. But that's a pretty big pool, especially for a small jurisdiction like that.
What do you think going forward here? I mean, obviously this case has drawn a lot of local and national attention. Do you think this is going to be one of those cases that around the country people are just glued to it every day?
I think it is. You know, you think back to the O.J. Simpson case. Everybody thought he did it, but they weren't 100% sure. And I think this is very similar. A lot of people think the stuff he did beforehand, the texting, the looking online for what it's like to have a child-free life, they think he probably did it, but they're wrestling with, could somebody do that to their own child? And that tension of maybe he's innocent, but probably not. I think that's what keeps people glued. If they knew he did it 100%, they wouldn't watch. If they knew he didn't do it, they wouldn't watch. It's that middle ground.
Think we'll see him on the stand?
If he gets desperate enough, I don't think so. It's a really tough call to put someone on the stand.
All right. Well, Randy, we appreciate your expertise, and we'll all be watching, right?
Thanks
a lot. Thanks for joining us this morning. We've covered this story.